Chapter 12, Production and Growth. In this chapter, we seek answers to these questions. What are the facts about living standards and growth rates around the world? Why does productivity matter for living standards? What determines productivity and its growth rate? How can public policy affect growth and living standards? Variations in the living standards. Among countries, average income in a rich country like United States and Japan or Germany is about 10 times the average income in a poor country like India, Nigeria, or Nicaragua. Differences are reflected in large differences in the quality of life, nutrition, housing, healthcare, life expectancy, and so on. Within a country and over time, the United States real gross domestic product per person growth is 2% per year for the past 100 years. Here is a chart that shows incomes and growth around the world, and you can see variations from 2.4% in China to 1.43% in the United Kingdom. Basic growth around the world. Because of differences in growth rates, ranking of countries by income changes substantially over time. Poor countries are not necessarily doomed to poverty forever. For example, Japan incomes were low in 1860 and are quite high today. In rich countries can't take their status for granted. They may be overtaken by poorer but fast-growing countries. Productivity, role and determinants. A country's standard of living depends on its ability to produce goods and services. Productivity, defined as Y over L, that is quantity of goods and services produced from each unit of labor. Productivity is a key determinant of living standards. When a nation's workers are very productive, real GDP is large and incomes are high. Productivity is important. Growth in productivity is the key determinant of growth in living standards. When productivity grows rapidly, so do living standards. An economy's income is the economy's output. A nation can enjoy a high standard of living only if it can produce a large quantity of goods and services. How productivity is determined. Physical capital, that is K. That is the stock of equipment and structures used to produce goods and services. Physical capital per worker, that is K, the ratio of K to L. Productivity is higher when the average worker has more capital, that is machines and equipment and so on. An increase in capital labor ratio causes an increase in productivity, which is Y, the ratio of Y to L. Human capital, or H. Human capital is defined as the knowledge and skills workers acquire through education, training, and experience. Human capital per worker is H over L, or the ratio of H to L. Productivity is higher when the average worker has more human capital, more educated, more skills, and so on. An increase in human capital labor ratio causes an increase in productivity. Natural resources, or N, input into production, and nature provides inputs into production that nature provides. That includes land and rivers and natural deposits. Natural resources per worker, or N/L. Other things equal, more N allows a country to produce more Y. An increase in N/L ratio causes an increase in YL ratio, or productivity. Technological advantage, A. Society's understanding of the best ways to produce goods and services. Common knowledge. After one person uses it, everyone becomes aware of it. Proprietary. It is known only by the company that discovers it. Any advance in knowledge that boosts productivity and allows society to get more output from its resources. Technological knowledge versus human capital. Technological knowledge refers to society's understanding of how to produce goods and services. Human capital results from the effort people expend to acquire this knowledge. Both are important for productivity. The production function, we put it all together, we call it production function, where output is equal to A times F into L, K, H, N. The production function is a graph or an equation showing the relation between output and inputs. F is the function that shows how inputs are combined to produce output. A is the level of technology. A multiplies the function F. So improvements in technology increases in A, allows more output, Y, to be produced from any given combination of inputs. Production function here assumes constant returns to scale. Changing all inputs by the same percentage causes output to change by that percentage. Doubling all inputs, that is multiplying by 2, causes outputs to double. That would be 2y equals A times F into 2L, 2K, 2H, and 2N. Increasing all inputs by 10%, that is multiplying each by 1.1, causes output to increase by 10%. That would be 1.1y equals A times F into 1.1L, 1.1K, 1.1H, 1.1N. If we multiply each input by 1 over L, then output is multiplied by 1 over L. Therefore, YL ratio is equal to A into F into 1 KL ratio, HL ratio, NL ratio. This equation shows that productivity, which is YL ratio, output per worker, depends on the level of technology, A, physical capital per worker, KL ratio, human capital per worker, HL ratio, natural resources per worker, NL ratio. An active learning 1, discussion questions. Which of the following policies do you think would be most effective at boosting growth and living standards in a poor country over the long run. Number A, offer tax incentives for investment by local firms. Number B, offer tax incentives for investment by foreign firms. Number C, give cash payments for good school attendance. Number D, crack down on government corruption. Number E, restrict imports to protect domestic industries. Number F, allow free trade. Number G, give away condoms. Think about that. Case study. Are natural resources a limit to growth? Some argue that population growth is depleting the Earth's non-renewable resources and thus will limit growth in living standards. But technological progress often yields ways to avoid these limits. Hybrid cars use less gas. Better insulation in homes reduces the energy required to heat or cool them. Market economy scarcity is reflected in market prices. If the world were running out of natural resources, their prices would be rising over time. In real terms, the prices of most natural resources are stable or falling. It appears that our ability to conserve these resources is growing more rapidly than their supplies are dwindling. Economic growth and public policy. A society's standard of living depends on its ability to produce goods and services. Productivity depends on physical capital per worker, human capital per worker, natural resources per worker, and technological knowledge. Policymakers, what can government policy do to raise productivity and living standards? Number one, savings and investment. To raise future productivity, encourage savings and investment. Invest more current resources in the production of capital. Producing more capital requires producing fewer consumption goods. Trade-off, sacrifice current consumption to increase future consumption. Reducing consumption equals increasing savings. These extra saving funds funds the production of investment goods. Diminishing returns. Policies that raise savings and investment, fewer resources are used to make consumption goods, more resources to make capital goods. Capital increases, raising productivity and living standards. This faster growth is temporary due to diminishing returns to capital. As capital rises, the extra output from an additional unit of capital falls. Here's a typical production function with output per worker measured on the vertical axis, that is productivity, and capital per worker measures on the horizontal axis, and this is typical production function. If workers have little capital, giving them more increases their productivity, like you can see here. If workers already have a lot of capital, giving them more increases productivity fairly little, like you can see in this end. The catch-up effect. The catch-up effect, the property whereby countries that start off poor tend to grow more rapidly than countries that start off rich. In 1960 to 1990, the US and South Korea had a similar share of GDP devoted to investment. Expect similar growth performance. Growth was greater than 6% in Korea, only 2% in the United States. The catch-up effect. In 1960, capital labor ratio was far smaller in Korea than in the United States. Hence, Korea grew faster. The catch-up effect, the property whereby countries that start off poor tend to grow more rapidly than countries that start off rich. So here would be a poor country starting here. Poor country starts here at this level of capital, and the rich country would start up way in front. This would be this would be United States, and this would be Korea at this point. An increase in capital labor ratio of the same amount, as you can see, the red and the blue and green are the same movement, leads to a different increase in productivity, much smaller in the United States or in a rich country, and much larger in the poor country, in this case, Korea. And that is the catch-up effect. Investment from abroad. An investment from abroad, another way for a country to invest in new capital. This would include foreign direct investment, that is capital investment that is owned and operated by a foreign entity. Foreign portfolio investment, that would be investment financed with foreign money but operated by domestic residents. Benefits from investment from abroad. Some benefits flow back to the foreign capital owners, increase the economy's stock of capital, higher productivity and higher wages, state-of-the-art technologies developed in other countries, especially good for poor countries that cannot generate enough savings to fund investment projects themselves. Education. Education is equal to investment in human capital. The gap between wages of educated and uneducated workers. There is opportunity cost of education. Wages are forgone while you are getting an education. It confers positive externalities, subsidies of human capital investment, public education. Problem for poor countries is brain drain. Health and nutrition. Healthcare expenditure. This is a type of investment in human capital. Healthier workers are more productive. In countries with significant malnourishment, raising workers' caloric intake raises productivity. In 1962 to 1995, caloric consumption rose 44% in South Korea, and economic growth was spectacular. Nobel winner Robert Fogel said 30% of Great Britain's growth from 1790 to 1980 was due to improved nutrition. Vicious cycle in poor countries. Poor countries are poor because their populations are not healthy, and populations are not healthy because they are poor and cannot afford better health care and nourishment. The virtuous cycle. Policies that lead to more rapid economic growth would naturally improve health outcomes, which in turn would further promote economic growth. So there's a vicious cycle of poverty and virtuous cycle. Property rights and political stability. Markets are usually a good way to organize economic activity. To foster economic growth, protect property rights, the ability of people to exercise authority over the resources they own, prerequisite for the price system to work. Courts enforce property rights and promote political stability. Major problem, lack of property rights. Contracts are hard to enforce. Fraud, corruption often goes unpunished. Firms must bribe government officials for permits. Political instability, e.g., frequent revolutions and coups. This creates uncertainty over whether property rights will be protected in the future. Free trade. Trade can make everyone better off. Inward-oriented policies aim to raise living standards by avoiding interaction with other countries. Examples: tariffs, limits on investment from abroad. Outward-oriented outward-oriented policies promote integration with the world economy. Examples: elimination of restrictions on trade or foreign investment. Trade has similar effects as discovering new technologies, improves productivity and living standards. Countries with inward-oriented policies have generally failed to create growth. Argentina, throughout the 20th century, had inward-oriented policies. Countries with outward-oriented policies have often succeeded, like South Korea, Singapore, and Taiwan. What do experts say about innovation and growth? Future innovations worldwide will not be transformational enough to promote sustained per capita economic growth rates in the United States and Western Europe over the next century, as high as those over the past 150 years. What do economists say? 59% are uncertain, 34% disagree, 7% agree. Research and development. Technological progress, main reason why living standards rise over the long run. Knowledge is a public good. Ideas can be shared freely, increasing the productivity of many. Policies to promote technological progress, like patent laws, tax incentives, or direct support for private sector research and development, grants for basic research at universities. Population growth, large population, more workers to produce goods and services, large total output of goods and services, and more consumers. Population growth may affect living standards in three different ways. One, stretching natural resources. 200 years ago, Malthus argued that population growth will strain society's ability to produce for itself. Mankind is doomed forever to live in poverty. Since then, the world population has increased sixfold and living standards increased. Malthus failed to account for technological progress and productivity growth. Diluting the capital stock, number two. High population growth, that is higher L, spread the capital stock more thinly, that is lower capital labor ratio, lower productivity and living standards. Many developing countries with policies, government regulation, China's one-child law between 1980 and 2015, increased awareness of birth control, equal opportunities for women, promote female literacy to raise opportunity costs for having babies. 3, promoting technological progress. World population growth is the same as or is equal to engine for technological progress and economic prosperity. More people is more scientists, more inventors is more engineers, is equal to more frequent discoveries. Michael Kramer, A Human History, states that growth rates increased as the world's population increased. More populated regions grew faster than less populated regions. Active learning too. Why is so much of Africa poor? Many of the poorest people on the planet live in sub-Saharan Africa. In 2017, GDP per person in this region, measured in 2011 dollars, was only 3,489, or 23% of the world average. 41% of population lives on less than $1.90 per day. Discuss some of the reasons or determinants of productivity that may explain the low economic development in this region. The answers: number 1, low capital investment; number 2, low educational attainment; number 3, poor health; number 4, high population growth; number 5, geographic disadvantages; number 6, restricted freedom; number 7, rampant corruption; number 8, the legacy of colonialism or colonization. Think, pair, and share. You are having a discussion with other young people from your generation. The conversation turns to a supposed lack of growth in the United States when compared to some Asian countries such as Japan, South Korea, and China. Your roommates say these Asian countries must have cheated somehow. That is the only way they could have possibly grown so quickly. Number A, have you learned anything in this chapter that would make you question your roommate's assertion? Number B, the phenomenal growth rate of Japan since World War II has often been referred to as a Japanese miracle. Is it a miracle or is it explainable? Number C, are the high growth rates found in these Asian countries without cost? Chapter in a nutshell. Economic prosperity, GDP per person, varies substantially around the world. Because growth rates of real GDP also varies substantially, the relative positions of countries can change dramatically over time. The standard of living in an economy depends on the economy's ability to produce goods and services. Productivity depends on the physical capital, human capital, natural resources, and technological knowledge available to workers. Government policies can try to influence the economy's growth rate in many ways by encouraging saving and investment, facilitating investment from abroad, fostering education, promoting good health, maintaining property rights and political stability, allowing free trade, and supporting the research and development of new technologies. The accumulation of capital is subject to diminishing returns. The more capital an economy has, the less additional output the economy gets from an extra unit of capital. Although higher saving leads to higher growth for a period of time, growth eventually slows down as capital, productivity, and income rise. The return to capital is especially high in poor countries. Other things being equal, these countries can grow faster because of the catch up effect.